true. When I got involved in the fight against the death penalty back in the 1980s, I first worked on Clarence Branley's case, and he was innocent, and we did get him released from death row in 1990 after 10 years.
Yeah!
He is still fighting this disgusting racist state of Texas to get a dime of compensation for the 10 years that they took of his life. Innocence matters, because I wish it was only Rob Will and Troy Davis that are innocent. Oh my God, that would be great. But check this out. For every 8 people that are executed, 1 person is released from death row because they're innocent. Now, what kind of batting average is that when you're playing with somebody's life? At first, when I would tell people, well, I think so-and-so's innocent, or so-and-so's innocent, they're like, oh yeah, right, Gloria. But the facts that are coming out, the people that are being exonerated, have actually proven this true. Anthony Graves was the 138th person in the United States released from death row. I hope that one day we can add Troy Davis and Rob Will to that list.
Yeah.
Because those 2 men are innocent. But like I said, I wish they were the only 2. Innocence matters now because this is actually the issue that is changing hearts and minds in this country. People look at what's going on and they, Texas is, I'm sure we all know because we live here, is the leading state for executions. There's been 468. There's another 10 scheduled, and the attorneys tell me that there's several dozen who have no more appeals. So this could be a very horrible year as far as numbers. But even in Texas, executions are down. Even in Houston, which is the jurisdiction in the United States that has sent more people to death row and has executed more people, innocence matters. Juries in Houston went almost 2 years without sending anybody to death row in 2009, 2010. So people are learning, wow, I could be one of those jurors that could send somebody to death row, and 5 or 10 years later, people are asking me, how could you have done that? They're innocent. So jurors are not as, even in Texas, jurors are not as willing to send anybody to death row. This is good. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of a friend of mine who was executed back in 1997. I was doing a radio show on the death penalty in Houston on the Pacifica station, and I made the comment that no matter what somebody did, the state of Texas doesn't have the right to execute them. 99% of our prosecutors are white. We know how racist cops are. So, and the courts, the judges, the DAs, I mean, the whole system is racist and it's biased against anybody that does not have money. So innocence matters because it's what's going to turn this issue around, which is why it's so important to look at cases like Troy Davis, to look at cases like Rob Wills. I'm going to give just a little bit of history. When the electric chair was first invented, before that, in the 1920s, before that, people were hung in the town squares, from the same trees that people were lynched from. But the lynchings became legal. Then in 1924 in Texas, executions became centralized in Huntsville. If you go out to the prison cemetery in Huntsville, you can find among the oldest graves the graves of 5 African American men who were the first victims of the electric chair. And I don't think it was any accident that 5 black men were the first victims, because it really was a continuation of lynchings, but they were under the guise of the law. One of the men that was executed on February 1924 in the electric chair, as they did one after another, his name was George Washington. His mom probably, and like I said, he was African American. His mother probably didn't know that George Washington was a slave owner, and probably thought she was naming her son after our first president, and she probably had great hopes for him. And instead, George Washington is buried in the prison cemetery in Huntsville as one of these 5 victims. In the 1960s, there was kind of a de facto halt to executions all over the country, really, because of the civil rights movement and the black liberation movement, the movement of oppressed peoples. And finally, in 1972, the Supreme Court actually said it was arbitrary and capricious, and we kind of needed to get the law together. So they put into law what was really already happening, and that was no executions. But it didn't take long for people to change the states to change the laws and executions to resume again. On December 7th, 1982, Texas put to death a man named Charlie Brooks in Huntsville. I went to that execution not sure what to expect, and back then executions were at midnight, which added to the it made it even more macabre. You know, somebody being put to death at midnight as the clock struck midnight. Since then, 468 people have been executed. The majority of them African American and Latino, many not even citizens of this country. 468. So we're nearing 500 executions just in Texas. Harris County, or Houston, where I'm from, has put to death about over 100, I can't remember, which is more than any state except Texas. So we've got a job to do. Have any of y'all, raise your hand if you've ever been to Huntsville.
Right here, yeah.
Okay, a few people. And you'll have plenty of opportunities, but one of these executions this summer, you should go and just be out there on the street protesting an execution, possibly standing next to somebody's son or daughter or brother or mother while their loved one's being put to death. I don't care if they were innocent or guilty. I can guarantee you they did not get a fair trial. I can guarantee you they didn't have a dream team. I can guarantee you that this racist state has no business putting anybody to death in Huntsville. Let me look at my notes and I'm going to wrap up. One more fact that we should all know, because we are in the South, is that 85 to 90% of all executions in this country since the death penalty was reinstated in 76 take place in former Confederate states. The former slaveholding states of the South are where execution happens. They don't happen in Iowa or Vermont or Massachusetts. They happen in the South, and this is no accident. I think it's so important for us to keep in mind the issue of race and racism and national oppression when we talk about the death penalty. In fact, when we talk about prisons, because that's what it's about. I want to end by saying that I visited Rob about 3 weeks ago, and for somebody that had just been shot with, the hell do you call it? They've got so many weapons right now on death row. I swear to God, when I get these letters from people, I'm like, are they talking about Afghanistan or Livingston, Texas? They've got grenades, they've got riot guns, they've got gas, something like a paintball gun, but it shoots something filled with gas. They got metal batons that they beat people with. They got tons of weapons. So Rob had stuck his leg up. We were taking a picture. You get to take a photo during the first week of the month. And unfortunately, they wouldn't let his leg be in the picture. But the reason he wanted his leg in the picture is that he had 7 or 9 circles on his body where they had shot him with some kind of riot gun. There was a bruise in the middle and then red all around it. I've never seen anything like it. This is what's happening on death row. When the men on death row were moved to Pulaski in 1999 and 2000, it only took a few weeks before we started getting letters. One of the guys said something that I think is so important to remember. He said, "We were sentenced to death, not torture. We are being tortured." And they had only been there a few weeks. Now, because of the isolation, these guys are in cells with a solid steel door. They've got a little window that they can look outside of, but it's way up by the ceiling. So if they get on their bunk and then pull themselves up, so if you can do that, you can look outside. The solid steel door has a slot where they stick the food tray in, and it has 2 skinny windows with that wire stuff in it. So they're basically surrounded by 4 white walls, a white ceiling, a white floor, 23 hours a day. If they're lucky, they get out for rec. They go to recreation alone, they eat alone, they shower alone. If they're fortunate, they get a visitor. But the isolation is driving them mad. Just men who eat their eyeballs are not normal. One man, Andre Thomas, I think, just ate his 2nd eyeball this year. He had eaten the first one a couple of years ago. This is what death row is doing. It's torturing people to the point of making them crazy, to where they smear feces on themselves or on the walls. People holler and scream and wail all night. It's horrible. The Texas Abolition Movement has begun a campaign around that, and we're going through channels right now, talking to legislators, talking to ministers, talking to the community about this. We're going to be going to the prison board meeting. They let you speak twice a year. And one of the meetings is coming up on Friday, August 19th. I encourage you to meet us in Austin. You can sign up to speak. And usually when a lot of people are speaking on one subject, they limit you. But the board needs to know that they're being responsible for torturing people to death. Suicides are up on death row. But back to my visit with Rob. Despite the fact that he had these horrible things on his legs that they wouldn't let him show in a photograph, he was in great spirits because he said, "Man, a couple of days ago the warden came to me and he said, all right, tell all those people to quit calling. We're drilling holes in the showers." They had sealed up the showers so that the men were getting sick in the shower from the heat. They couldn't control the temperature. And guys would walk out of the shower and fall out on the floor. They'd vomit. So apparently there's a little air now circulating in the showers. So that one small little thing, he was so tickled because he said, "We won one victory. We just got to keep going." So I urge you all to get involved. If there's any way you can join us in Austin at the prison board meeting on the 19th, do so. And I think the lesson that Rob Will has, and all of the activists on death row, have taught us is if you dare to struggle, you can dare to win. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria, so much for coming and speaking for us. I did want to open it up just briefly for other activists who are interested in coming and sharing some words about their activism in the abolitionist community and why they stand up for prisoners' rights and to abolish the death penalty. And so I wanted to open that up. If there's anybody who wants to share that, it's just some brief words. You can at this time. I'm just going to go ahead and open the bullhorn up for that.